Good morning, everyone. It looks like most of our expected attendees have joined the meeting, so in the interest of time, I'm going to go ahead and get started. This is Russell Cook from the Silver State Health Insurance Exchange, and I wanted to welcome you all and thank you for joining us for our August monthly carrier meeting. August is a very exciting month for the transition, and we got a lot of good information for you, so we appreciate your time in joining us this morning. Wanted to start off, as we always do, with a quick round of introductions for our personnel here. We have Heather Korbulik, who is our Executive Director, Ryan High, our Chief Operations Officer, myself, Russell Cook, I'm the Information Systems Manager for the Exchange. We also have Eric Watt, Senior Project Manager for the transition, and we have Jamie Sawyer, who is our Plan Certification Manager. So let's dive right into the agenda. Oh, you know what? Before we do, just a couple of procedural items. I wanted to ask everyone to please make sure they are on mute. Our recording this presentation, as we usually do, we're going to post the recording to our website afterwards, but it really helps us to keep the audio nice and clean and clear and easily understandable if you're all on mute to cut down on the background noise. Now, you're more than welcome to raise a question if you want to. You can do so by voice, or if you would prefer, you can do so using our chat feature in the Zoom meeting controls. You can send a private chat just to me, or if you're comfortable sharing it with everyone, you can send a question that'll be visible to everyone. On today's agenda, we're going to give a quick update on the progress since last meeting. Lots been happening. We're going to give an update on plan certification. We're going to give another update on the casework system that we are developing to replace the SSHIX system, the casework system that is administered by healthcare.gov. And then we're going to talk a bit about the EDI testing activities in September. That is specifically renewals and payment redirects. We're going to give you some more detailed information on the timing of that testing, as well as the preparation efforts in particular as it relates to the payment redirects. There's some information we need to get to you, and there's some information we need to receive from you. Lastly, we are going to discuss some issues related to enrollments during the transition period. The first relates to OEP enrollments, extended OEP enrollments between December 15th and December 20th. And the second item and the last issue we'll be discussing today relates to SEP enrollments during the transition period. We've received a number of questions in recent weeks from carriers, and so we wanted to give you a high-level overview of how we are tackling that problem. So let's get started on progress since last meeting. We mentioned last month that our production platform was deployed and available in late June, and that at the beginning of July we started sending out invitations to agents and brokers who we were considering returning brokers because they had existing relationships with consumers through healthcare.gov. This particular population had assisted consumers with healthcare.gov enrollments during last year's OEP, so during the open enrollment period in November and December of 2018. And we're happy to announce that over 300 agents and brokers with existing consumer designations through healthcare.gov have completed the training curriculum as well as the account registration and certification process for the Nevada HealthLink platform. So these individuals who completed their training and got their certification in place prior to the upcoming consumer data migration are going to be eligible to maintain their existing designations following that consumer data migration. And I think we've mentioned many times before, but just wanted to reiterate, the consumer data migration, we're going to be receiving a payload from CMS this week on the 15th. And we have scheduled the import to take place between the 15th and the 31st of August. So it's not a one-shot deal. The data is coming in two separate payloads. There's the application data in the one payload and the enrollment data in the other payload. And there's also plenty of testing along the way that we're going to be doing to verify the integrity of the data and to ensure that any discrepancies, such as duplicate enrollments or any ongoing reconciliation issues that may be in progress, are resolved, and that the right consumers are matched with the right enrollments prior to our soft launch next month. So, and then the last step of that data migration process, once we get all the applications and enrollment files in place, is to recreate those consumer designation relationships, again, for those agents and brokers with the existing designations through healthcare.gov who were able to complete our certification process in time. And the next update I wanted to give, we've been very active with our testing activities. There's been a whole lot of that going on since the last monthly meeting, and we are happy to report that testing of eligibility verification services, those are the Federal Data Services Hub services administered by CMS and the IRS. Those services are used to verify eligibility for QHPs as well as for subsidies, APTC subsidies and cost-sharing reductions. So we've been testing the hub services, and we have also been testing account transfers with our sister agency, the Division of Welfare and Supportive Services. DWSS is Nevada's Medicaid administering entity. And in both of those areas, hub services as well as account transfers, we are continuing to proceed on schedule. So we're looking good there, and looks like we're going to be in good shape well in advance of when we're going to need to start actually using those services during open enrollment. Next, a quick update on the plan certification process. As I'm sure most or all of you know, plan preview began on Monday of last week, August 5th, and is ongoing right now. In preparation for plan preview during the month of July, we worked with issue organizations so that their personnel could be assigned issuer representative user accounts. And prior to the start of the plan preview last week, we were happy to report that all carriers had their designated personnel signed up, accounts registered on the platform, and all the required information for the issuer organizations themselves was squared away on the platform. So we really appreciate your assistance with that process and for getting those accounts registered in a timely manner, and that allowed us to get all of the plan data pushed over from SURF and made available to you for plan preview. As I mentioned, plan preview began Monday of last week, August 5th, and it is scheduled to conclude on Friday, August 23rd. And I did want to mention that last week, on Friday of last week, one of our carriers brought it to our attention that one of the data fields on the plan details page was displaying an incorrect value. This particular data field is labeled outpatient facility fee, and there are in-network and out-of-network values that were being displayed incorrectly. So we're happy to report that we have resolved the issue. We were able to get that fix deployed yesterday. So if you happen to notice that that particular data field wasn't displaying the correct value, that should be fixed now. And if you have any further questions about any of the data fields listed on the plan details page, please feel free to reach out and email Jamie Sawyer. I know that she is keeping an eye on her inbox for any questions related to plan preview or the plan verification and certification process. Looks like we've got a question here by chat. Let's see here. This is regarding the schedule for plan preview. So the question is, we were advised yesterday that plan preview would be extended to September 6th. I was aware that we were exploring this option because there is a dependency on the final data transfer from SURF. So Jamie, are you on the phone? Jamie Sawyer?
I am, yes.
Could you please confirm for us, the reason I didn't add this to the slide is because I wasn't sure and I didn't want to jump the gun, but it sounds like, as is often the case, our carriers have better and more up-to-date information than I do. Jamie, can you please confirm whether or not we're going to be able to extend that plan preview timeline to September 6th?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm also, just for the record, following up with an email with all of our carriers regarding this and what it means for the rest of the timeline that's within our letter to issuers. But we have wanted to ensure that all of our carriers have adequate time to complete the plan preview testing. So we have approved the change from August 5th through August 23rd to now August 5th through September 6th. So the only other date that does impact is the final data transfer, which we're aligning with the final date of plan preview now of September 6th. But as I said, I will follow up with a detailed email so everybody has that updated schedule and has more information surrounding that.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks, Jamie. And that's really good news. And my understanding was that that change in the schedule required some coordination with other agencies, and we had to bounce that off of CMS because that impacted our existing schedule, which was chosen to align with CMS's plan certification timeline. So, but we definitely had some interest from carriers who were requesting a bit more time, so I'm glad we're able to accommodate that. Thanks for the update, Jamie. So I hope that answers your question online, but if there are any follow-up questions, please let me know. I'll keep an eye on the chat window, and we'll move on. Next, we have, this is exciting to me because I've really been wanting to get working on this for a while. Over the last several months, we've received a number of inquiries from different carriers regarding what are we going to do to replace the HIX system. That is I think it is the Health Information Casework System that's administered by CMS. And our understanding is that it was used primarily for consumer complaints that were registered through the healthcare.gov call center, but which required some sort of collaboration or investigation with carriers. And so we also have been receiving a number of inquiries from carriers about what are we going to use just to support the general reconciliation workflow, because email is obviously quite cumbersome and is not a good fit for the secure transmission of sensitive data. So we've been looking into various solutions, and we're very excited that we have decided to buy the Salesforce Enterprise Service Cloud platform, which provides a ton of customer relations management functionality out of the box. And we're going to be working over the next couple months in collaboration with carriers to customize that to support not only the monthly reconciliation process, but also the consumer complaint resolution processes. And so right now we are we've been spending the last couple weeks digging around in the HIX system, gathering requirements, and basically creating data models and documenting the business process flows that seem to be accommodated by that system. Now, we understand that carriers are not 100% thrilled with the functionality of the HIX system, and several carrier organizations have expressed their wish to us to refine or supplement the functionality in HIX to kind of work out some of those kinks. So looking down the road at the next 3 months, I wanted to give just a high-level overview of our schedule, of our timeline for the rollout. So as I mentioned, we've been working for the last couple weeks on a requirements gathering effort, which includes not only documenting all the data fields and the relationships between the data objects that are utilized in the HIX system, but also the workflows that are implicit in the screen flows and in the functionality that is provided to the different user roles in the HIX system. And starting next week and continuing through the end of the month, we're going to be reaching out to contact carrier organizations for individual discussions regarding the design and the workflows that we modeled after the HIX system. And in particular, we're looking for feedback on the existing HIX functionality. I mentioned before that we're aware, based upon feedback that we've been receiving, that there are perhaps some changes that carriers would make if they were able to the HIX system. And so given that we have an opportunity to kind of customize and perhaps expand upon the functionality in the HIX system, we wanted to take advantage of that opportunity to do so. So we wanted to provide time to each of our carrier organizations to meet with us, share some of the lessons learned, pain points, a wish list, if you will, for HIX functionality, and also to firmly establish those relationships because myself, Russell, I'm going to be heading up our internal reconciliation team once we get the SVE platform up and running. So we'd love to get to meet your reconciliation personnel as well as any customer service personnel who may be utilizing the HIX system and really understand kind of that distinction between which types of issues are best thought of as customer service issues and which types of issues are fall squarely within the realm of monthly reconciliation. So we look forward to sharing some of our design ideas with you and collaborating on the final product design there. So we'll be rolling those meetings out in the next couple weeks. And then during the month of September, we really wanted to focus on internal efforts related to design, development, testing, and implementation. So we're going to be doing internal user acceptance testing, internal unit testing, and we're going to be working carefully to verify the security of the user roles to make sure that data for each carrier organization is cleanly and clearly sequestered within that carrier organization, and that you all aren't able to access, each other's issues. And then during October, we want to take advantage of that home stretch leading up to open enrollment to open this platform up to carriers for collaborative user acceptance testing. We'd love to get your feedback, make sure that we got it right, and if there are any changes that you feel need to be implemented during that month of October, if they are, if the level of effort is reasonable enough, we have allowed time for additional implementation and development in October. And if these are bigger issues, we're happy to document them and address them on an ongoing basis. We are taking complete ownership of this Salesforce product, this casework system internally. We are not beholden to any vendors, so we are looking forward to providing an ongoing and responsive development process to make sure that we're able to customize this tool to your liking in a way that really maximizes your efficiency for, again, consumer complaint resolution, consumer assistance, as well as monthly reconciliation. Okay, so there are a couple of slides here at the end related to special considerations for enrollments during this transition period. And the first relates to a topic that we've been discussing with CMS, which is extended enrollments. Oh, I'm sorry, geez, I'm looking at that. I can see my next slide over on my presenter screen. Sorry, I was getting ahead of myself here. We need to talk about EDI testing first. So we are currently in the midst of phase 2 of EDI testing. There was a round of carriers that had completed EDI testing back during May and June. And then we started a second round of carriers on the 15th of July because these carriers, for a variety of reasons, needed to conduct their testing using plan year 2020 data. And obviously that data wasn't available back in May when we were doing the first round of testing. So we're happy to report that carriers are making good progress, and we are working with them to ensure that they are all able to get across the finish line and get those first 15 EDI test scenarios completed. However, as we mentioned before, there was a 16th test scenario listed on the spreadsheet, which related to renewals. And we had identified a couple of dependencies early on which prevented us from being able to conduct testing for scenario 16 back in May and June when we were putting the first round of carriers through the EDI testing process. The first dependency was related to test data that was being provided by CMS. We just didn't have it ready yet, and they weren't able to provide it to us that early. The second dependency, of course, is that we needed 2 subsequent years of plan data. We needed both plan year 19 as well as plan year 20 data and the accompanying crosswalk table in order to facilitate the renewals testing. So we do have that lined up and ready to go. That is going to be happening between September 9th and September 20th. And Earl Smith, who is coordinating testing on the Get Insured side, as well as Stephen Austin from SSHIX, they're going to be reaching out to provide additional details via email to make sure that you all have the information you need headed into that test there. And so that you understand. I believe we discussed with each one of you individually how the renewals are going to be coded, but we're going to give you a recap of that just so there are no surprises headed into the renewal testing phase, and that's going to be happening at the beginning of September. And then the activities surrounding the payment redirect testing process are going to be spread out over about a 6-week period because we want to provide ample lead time to carriers to prep for this. It's kind of a fundamentally different type of testing than the EDI testing with 834s and the RCNI file and the renewals, etc. This one relates to the payload that is transmitted to carriers' websites from the Nevada HealthLink platform after consumers have submitted their enrollments. And the purpose is to facilitate binder payments. You all need a payload that you can match up to the 834 once it's received and processed so that you can match up a binder payment to an enrollment and effectuate the policy. So we're going to be starting this week. By Friday, we are going to provide security certificates as well as the IP addresses that we are going to be using for those outbound redirects to carriers. And that'll give a couple weeks for carriers to register those security certificates, to whitelist the IP addresses that we are providing this week. And then we also need in return from carriers a URL to be used during testing. So this is the destination for the redirect link. So we'll provide you with the IP addresses that the redirect is going to originate from, and we need you to provide us with the URL that the redirect will be pointing towards. So we're looking to have all that lined up by the 30th of August. And then for the first couple weeks of September, and during this time period when we're going to be conducting the EDI test scenario 16, we're going to be working internally on testing and, in particular, connectivity testing to make sure that the whitelisting of the IP addresses was implemented successfully and that we are able to negotiate connections and that the security certificates are properly registered in both places. That is going to lay the foundation for the actual testing activities, which involve carriers to be on the receiving end of these redirects, and that's scheduled to begin on 9/23 to 10/4. So I think we had previously indicated that the testing for payment redirects was going to be occurring all throughout the month of September and beginning in early September, but we wanted to clarify that it's actually going to be divided up into a couple of different distinct phases, and most of what's going to be happening during the first 2 weeks of September is not going to require much in the way of direct involvement or coordination from carriers, so long as you're able to get those IP addresses whitelisted and get those security certificates registered. That will allow us to hit the ground running on Monday the 23rd and actually begin sending some payloads your way. And in the meantime, we're also going to be working on documentation that we hope to be able to provide you by the end of the month in line with that 8/30 deadline. That's going to provide a bit more in the way of technical details regarding the payload implementation. We've done our best to duplicate precisely the payload format and data fields that are utilized by the FFM for their SAML format payload, but there were a few areas where we just had to deviate. In particular, we have a different system for assigning exchange-assigned subscriber IDs as well as enrollment IDs, so we are going to be nailing all that down in documentation for you so that you can see clearly how the fields are mapped relative to what's happening right now with the FFE. Okay, now we're talking about enrollments between 12:15 and 12:20. So this is one of the issues I mentioned at the head of the meeting that's going to require some special consideration, though it should be largely similar to what's happening right now with the FFE. So we have adopted the CMS policy of extending OEP enrollment dates for consumers who have started their applications, but who may not have completed their enrollments by midnight on December 15th. It was our understanding that these consumers are allowed to complete their enrollments and submit those enrollments through midnight on December 20th, and we are planning on doing the same thing here. So if a consumer has started their application, they got their foot in the door by midnight on December 15th, we're going to run a script that will allow them to, it'll extend the deadline date for those applications through to the 20th of December. Again, as far as we're aware, this is precisely aligned with the functionality on the FFE, but we did want to confirm with you that because we run our nightly batch process, I believe it runs around 7 p.m. or so, owing to that nightly batch process for 834s, carriers may receive OEP initial enrollment transactions as late as December 22nd. So if we get them before 7 p.m. on the 20th, you'll receive them the same day, and if we get them after 7 p.m. on the 20th, they wouldn't come till the next day. But depending on which time zone you're in, that might push us just past midnight on the 22nd. So we just wanted you to be aware that there may be an additional batch cycle involved on the 21st to catch those last-minute enrollment submissions in the closing hours of December 20th. So we wanted to bring this to your attention and make sure that you're aware of those requirements. And of course, if you have any questions or concerns, please send an email to Eric Watt, and we'll make sure to address those head-on. Let's see here. I had a question by chat that I wanted to circle back to. Oh, yeah. So there was a question regarding, so a number of carriers who are currently participating in EDI have requested or inquired about the possibility of extending this Phase 2 EDI test window. You know, we understand completely we're only allowing half as much time for this window. We allowed, I think, well, 1 month as opposed to 2 months, which was allowed for the previous window, and that's moving at a pretty good clip. So yes, we have been in individual contact with a number of carrier organizations who are currently working their way through the EDI testing process, the first 15 scenarios. And I just want to assure you that yes, any individual accommodations that we have made will be honored, and it is absolutely our goal to make sure that each and every carrier organization completes EDI testing successfully. We have already spoken with our vendor, Get Insured, about the contingency plan related to leaving that test environment open past the end of August if necessary, and we are working to make those adjustments. I believe we're going to have to use a separate test environment for Scenario 16 and for payment redirects as a result. But yes, any information that we had provided to carriers individually regarding the possibility of extra time to complete EDI testing is still valid, still stands. And you know, while we are under the gun here to get this done as quickly as possible, again, it's absolutely in everyone's best interest for us to work with you to get that done during the current time frame. So hope that answers the question, and if not, please feel free to send me a follow-up email. Again, we don't want to, we want to alleviate concerns, not create them. So if you have any questions, please just reach out to us, and we'll make sure to schedule some time with you. Okay, so I think we wrapped up on enrollments between 1215 and 1220, but just to summarize, we are aligning ourselves with CMS. We intend to provide an extended window to get those consumers who have in-progress applications or who perhaps have completed their application but not submitted an enrollment, just a few extra days at the end of OEP. And again, it's our understanding that that's exactly how the FFE handles these types of enrollments. But again, any questions, concerns, please don't hesitate to reach out. Okay, and the last topic of the day is a popular one. We've received a number of inquiries recently about the issue of SEP enrollments during this transition period. How are these going to be handled if consumers are submitting SEP enrollments to healthcare.gov, and how does that align with our data migration activities? So we've touched on this in previous meetings, but I thought it might be helpful to kind of divide up the transition time period into 3 different chunks of time here, because there are going to be 3 different contingencies in place to handle the SEP enrollments during these different time periods. So first, I wanted to discuss the issue of consumers who submit SEP enrollments to healthcare.gov between August 15th and September 30th. The reason why August 15th is an impactful date is because that's when we're going to be receiving our initial consumer data migration payload from CMS. So we're going to be receiving a snapshot in time this Friday for all of the active enrollments as they exist in the healthcare.gov database at that time. But then the clock is going to start ticking, of course, on any changes or SEP enrollments that are submitted after we extract that August 15th payload. So we are scheduling an additional catch-up data transfer for October 1st, and the purpose of that data transfer is to capture any SEP enrollments that are submitted between August 15th and September 20th. Those are going to be included in this automated data migration effort as part of that catch-up file. And these consumers, because we're going to be importing them into the system at the beginning of October, prior to the start of our auto-renewal batch job, which is scheduled for October 15th, these consumers will potentially be eligible for auto-renewal. As we've discussed before, that will be dependent upon these consumers having either provided consent to the FFE for auto renewal or for passive renewal, or for providing consent to our platform if they had not previously provided it to healthcare.gov. Again, that is a convention that was in place through healthcare.gov. We did not invent the idea of consent for passive renewal, but in our discussions with CMS, the plan that we discussed and the plan that was approved was to retain this notion of consumers consenting not only for passive renewal, but for consumers who may be eligible for subsidies. There is a separate consent field to automatically re-verify financial eligibility for subsidies through the IRS each year as part of the passive renewal job. So we will make every effort. We have developed messaging to consumers encouraging them to provide this consent. We want to get as many consumers as possible on board with this auto renewal, but at this time we do require consent from consumers for that passive renewal. The next phase, after August 15th to September 30th, occurs during the month of October and overlaps a bit with the passive renewal job that I mentioned previously, which is scheduled to start on October 15th. So consumers who submit SEP enrollments to healthcare.gov during this time period between October 1st and October 24th, they will also be included in the automated data migration effort, but because the final catch-up file that we are receiving from CMS will be extracted on October 25th, we will be receiving that payload too late to allow those consumers to be processed by the passive renewal eligibility job. So rather than being potentially eligible for that auto renewal based upon their consent, these consumers will instead receive an email invitation to claim their migrated application and actively shop for 2020 coverage during OEP. So again, we will be able to capture these SEP enrollments. We will import them automatically into the system, but we will not be able, because of the timing, to automatically renew these consumers that are part of this last catch-up data transfer. We will not be able to automatically renew them into coverage for 2020. We will be sending them an email as well as follow-up emails to make sure that the message is received. But we will be dependent upon that messaging to make sure that they complete their enrollment. As I mentioned, though, we will automatically populate their application into the system, so it should be as painless of a process as possible for them to claim that application, review and make any updates as necessary, and then select a plan for 2020 coverage. Now, the final time period actually extends into 2020 because consumers are provided a window of 40 days to submit SEP enrollments 40 days from the date of their life event, which could take them into January for a December event. So we've simplified by simply stating that this time period applies to consumers who submit SEP enrollments to healthcare.gov, again, for 2019 coverage after October 24th. These consumers will not be picked up by the automated data migration effort, and they will require targeted messaging regarding active shopping for 2020 coverage. So this is where our coordinated messaging plan with CMS comes into play, and this is where we could really use some assistance and some collaboration with carriers. So first I wanted to mention that for some time now, we've been working with CMS to develop a messaging plan to ensure that consumers who are seeking 2019 coverage via SEP enrollment receive the appropriate guidance. And this includes coordinated messaging on both platforms, both Nevada HealthLink as well as healthcare.gov. So if a consumer comes to Nevada HealthLink first and they're seeking 2019 coverage, they're going to be redirected to healthcare.gov and they're going to be provided with some basic instructions on how to submit an SEP application and also contact info for the healthcare.gov call center. If a consumer goes to healthcare.gov to submit an SEP enrollment for 2019 coverage, once they submit their application and complete their enrollment, they will receive targeted messaging indicating to them that they must go over to Nevada HealthLink and actively shop for 2020 coverage because they will have missed the cutoff date for participation in the automated data migration. So again, 3 different time periods here with 3 different contingency plans. We're going to have the most flexibility over the first group, which is going to be included in the initial data, in the first catch-up file. The second group, we're going to have some limitations because although we will be supporting their applications, we will be receiving that payload after the start of our passive renewal job. And then the last group here, which is going to take us start on October 25th and continue into January of 2020, these are going to require that targeted messaging and may require more in the way of a manual effort to reach out to these consumers and ensure that they are enrolled in 2020 coverage. And we've been discussing this contingency with our call center and also discussing with CMS at a policy level what kinds of accommodations can be made for consumers in terms of overrides and backdates for consumers who may have filed their SEP enrollment on time, but who may have been confused and just didn't understand the necessity of coming over to the Nevada Health Link platform and enrolling actively in 2020 coverage. And that is another area where Heather and I will be reaching out to carriers in the coming weeks to discuss at a deeper level those policy considerations and make sure that we are in sync in terms of what types of accommodations can be made for consumers who may enroll, again, in an SEP enrollment for 2019 coverage, but who may not properly enroll actively during OEP for 2020 coverage. And just to wrap things up, I mentioned the coordinated messaging plan that we've been working on with CMS, but what we really want to spend some time working on is a collaborative plan with carriers. Because you all are going to be on the receiving end of 834s for SEP enrollments during that transition period, we're encouraging carriers to actively participate in consumer messaging, and we also are going to be reaching out to carriers, as I mentioned previously, during this month of August to discuss options for targeted messaging and data exchange if we feel like there is a manner in which perhaps some reports that could be generated by carriers could be transmitted to SSHIX, and we could treat these stragglers who need to get enrolled actively in 2020 coverage as sort of a pseudo-reconciliation activity. These are all activities that we are willing and excited to participate in to make sure that the transition is as easy on our consumers as possible. But of course, we can only do so much on our own, so we'd appreciate the opportunity to speak with you about what types of direct messaging you might be able to provide to your consumers and to what extent we might be able to collaborate with you in support of that messaging process. And of course, as always, if you have any questions about SEP enrollments, if you have any questions about extended OEP enrollments between December 15th and 20th, please do not hesitate to submit any questions to Eric Watt. And I just, sorry, I want to pause here. I just had one question pop up on the group chat here. The question is that if we experience issues with hyperlinks in Plan Preview, should we send that information to Jamie or to Eric and you? The best thing to do in that case would be to send it to Jamie. Again, she is keeping an eye on her inbox for issues that are related to Plan Preview, and the most efficient path to a resolution would be to report it to Jamie first, and then she knows how to triage it from there. She can get me involved if we need to do some troubleshooting on the platform, or she can get insured involved if we need to submit a ticket to them if it is in fact a verified issue and something that needs to be resolved. And depending on what type of hyperlink is in question here, we may have the ability to edit that hyperlink without actually requiring a revised upload to SURF. But it just depends on which particular type of hyperlink you're referring to and where that is sourced from the SURF binder data. So please, yes, any questions regarding Plan Preview, any unusual behavior for the platform, please report it to Jamie as soon as possible so that she can track it in her issue log and, again, triage as necessary. So if you send it to Eric, that's fine. It'll end up in the right place. But for issues related to Plan Preview in particular, the shortest path to a resolution would be to send it to Jamie, and she'll make sure it gets pointed in the right direction if it's something that she's unable to resolve herself. All right, so I think that gets us to to the end of our presentation for today. As always, if you have any questions, any concerns, if you'd like additional information, additional detail in any particular area, we are more than happy to help provide that to you. Please just send a quick email to Eric Watt, and we will either respond with the information you requested, or if appropriate, we will reach out to schedule a one-on-one meeting with your personnel so that we can get all your questions or issues resolved. That goes for EDI testing, that goes for payment redirect testing, that goes for plan certification, plan preview, although as I mentioned, for issues that are unique to plan preview, feel free to email Jamie directly. Whoever you send these questions to, we will provide you with as responsive of an answer as we're able, and again, our number one goal at this point is to make sure that everyone comes along for the ride, and that all of our carriers are understanding exactly which tasks lay ahead of them, and that any questions you have get resolved in as a timely manner as we're able. So we thank you again for your participation. Thank you for your time, as always. We will be posting this presentation to our website later today. I'll send out an email, a reply to all for everyone who is on the meeting invite list today with a link to that page, and we will also, as always, be posting the presentation materials themselves. We'll put a PDF of the slides up later. So thanks again. Please keep the questions coming here. Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. There's one last question here, and okay, great. So this question, for anyone who hasn't hung up yet, and I apologize, this question just trickled in at the last second here. This was in regard to transparency and coverage requirements. And so this is an area where we have failed to make as much progress in the last month as we had hoped. I believe we mentioned in last month's presentation that we're going to update on transparency and coverage requirements. We are actively working on the transparency and coverage requirements in collaboration with our State Division of Insurance, but it looks like we're going to have to provide an update via email. I'm hoping that we can provide information prior to next month's meeting, but again, that is absolutely right on the question that was submitted, and I do apologize because we just didn't have sufficient information to provide an update this month. But I will be sure to make note of that and send you directly what little information we have at this point, as well as to provide a time frame for when we can provide a more detailed overview of those requirements, again, related to the transparency and coverage reporting requirements. So I apologize for that omission, but we appreciate you keeping us honest, and we will be reaching out to you directly to provide additional info. Any other questions before we conclude today's call, either by voice or by chat?
Russ, this is Deborah with Health Plan of Nevada. With the transparency and coverage requirements, we certainly appreciate you providing an update during next month's meeting. However, it's actually due before then for CMS, so how should we proceed with that?
I will discuss this with Heather and see how best to proceed for this. Again, because there's those requirements are not administered by us as an agency, so we're kind of beholden to our Division of Insurance for collaboration. But I will light a fire under that today, Deborah, and I will provide you with a response by the end of today. And once we get some clarity, I will send emails out to the rest of our carrier organizations as well. Again, I do apologize for that deficiency, but I appreciate the reminder, and I will be sure to spend some time today digging into this further and making sure that we're able to get you some information that you can use.
Thank you.
You're very welcome, and again, I apologize for the omission from today's agenda, but we'll make sure to get you, as well as the rest of the carriers, all the latest information we have by the end of today. And if there are any gaps in what we're able to provide you today, we'll let you know when you can expect a resolution, and we'll follow up. All right, well, again, my apologies for the omission, but we thank everyone for their time, and Deborah, you will hear from me by the end of the day, as will the rest of our carriers, with an update regarding transparency in coverage reporting requirements. Thanks again, everyone. Please email Eric, myself, or Jamie if you have any questions, and we look forward to speaking with you shortly regarding the issues that I discussed in relation to consumer messaging, as well as for our casework system. Thanks again, and we'll talk to you next month.